Human courage, endurance, and words have a great ability to turn the course of history. In this video, we are showing you the story of some decisions of such brave and courageous leaders who changed the history of not only the world, but also their nation. The first incident is of a 19-year-old Turkish Sultan Muhammad Fatih. In the 15th century, when he became the youngest sultan among the Turks, he was faced with the 1,000-year-old city Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Sultan wanted to conquer this city because the Turkish Empire was already present on both sides. But the strong and powerful city in the middle was creating many economic and diplomatic problems. Sultan had been dreaming of conquering this city since his childhood, but the problem was that this city was the strongest city of its time. The walls of the city had repelled 23 armies that had tried and failed. Despite the opposition of his ministers, the 19-year-old Sultan launched an attack on the city. Constantinople also had the support of the European Christian world, and if the European Crusader army had arrived, his forces could have been trapped. But despite all the difficulties, he attacked and succeeded. This was the last sign of the Roman Empire, and today, Constantinople is now Istanbul and is a permanent part of Turkey. The second story is of the Egyptian Mamluk Sultan Saifuddin. He was faced with the challenge of confronting the Mongols, whose atrocities had spread throughout the Islamic world at that time. The Mongol commander Hulagu Khan had devastated the Abbasid Caliphate's capital, Baghdad, and even confined the Abbasid Caliph Mutasim Billah in a tower to let him die of hunger and thirst. According to some accounts, he was killed by being trampled by horses. Now, Hulagu Khan's sights were set on Egypt. Sultan Saifuddin had to decide whether to confront the Mongol forces or not. He knew that if he were defeated by Hulagu Khan, his fate would be no different than the Abbasid caliphs, and his empire would be destroyed. However, this brave sultan refused to bow down to Hulagu Khan. Angered, Hulagu Khan attacked Syria and began advancing toward Egypt. But Saifuddin, fully prepared, marched out to face them and decisively defeated a Mongol army at the Battle of Ain Jalut in Syria. This victory changed the course of world history, and the Mongol invasion of the Islamic world was halted. Thus, Sultan Saifuddin's bravery saved both the Mamluk Empire and the Islamic world. Nearly 1,800 years ago, a Chinese general known as Guan Yu, who is also referred to as Guandi, made a remarkable mark in history through his perseverance and endurance. Guan Yu was famous for his endurance, and he faced a great test of it during a battle. He was struck by a poisoned arrow, which hit his arm. He removed the arrow, and the wound healed, but the poison had spread to the bone in his arm, causing him pain. When he consulted a doctor, the doctor said the poison could be removed by opening the wound and scraping the bone. Guan Yu agreed to the surgery. However, when the doctor suggested he be put under anesthesia, Guan Yu laughed and refused. He ordered a go board, a Chinese game similar to chess, and began playing it with his companion while the doctor performed the surgery. Blood flowed from his arm into a nearby bowl, but Guan Yu remained unfazed and continued to play. He eventually recovered and continued his military campaigns. He was later captured and killed during a battle, but his endurance and bravery inspired the Chinese people. The fourth story is about Queen Elizabeth I of England. In the 16th century, Queen Elizabeth I, the ruler of England, faced a great challenge. In 1588, a conflict arose between Spain and England. Spain, which was a superpower at the time, sent its naval fleet, known as the Armada, to attack England. The arrival of the Spanish Armada caused panic and fear across England. Many in England believed that because the Queen was a woman, she was weak and wouldn't be able to lead like a male king. But Queen Elizabeth I accepted this challenge. In one of her speeches, she said, "I know I have the body of a weak woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." She declared that she would personally take up arms, lead her troops, judge the situation, and reward them for their successes. This speech removed the fear of the Spanish Armada from the hearts of her people and filled them with new enthusiasm. Shortly afterward, the English Navy defeated the Spanish Armada, breaking the backbone of Spain's naval power. Queen Elizabeth I's timely leadership laid the foundation for Britain's rise as a superpower. She ruled England for 45 years, during which England's military power and trade increased tremendously. The fifth story is about Napoleon Bonaparte, the famous French emperor and general. There was a pivotal moment in Napoleon's life when he stood between life and death. In 1814, the alliance of Britain, Russia, and other European powers forced Napoleon to abdicate the throne and sent him into exile on the island of Elba in the Mediterranean. But Napoleon did not panic. Within a year, he returned to France with a few of his loyal guards. He landed in Cannes, and as he traveled, more and more French peasants joined him. In the meantime, the French government sent an army to arrest Napoleon. When the army reached him, they pointed their guns at him. It was a delicate moment, but Napoleon walked toward them and said, "If any of you want to kill your emperor, here I am." Hearing this, the soldiers were so moved that they dropped their weapons and began shouting, "Long live the emperor!" They joined Napoleon, and with their help, he regained control of France. Although he was defeated again at the Battle of Waterloo within 100 days and exiled once more, the bravery with which he faced the soldiers at that crucial moment became immortal in history. The sixth story is from World War II, about American General Anthony McAuliffe. During the war, as Allied forces advanced toward Germany from France, they encountered a difficult situation. At one point, the Germans launched a counterattack at the Battle of the Bulge, surrounding some American forces. The Germans demanded that General McAuliffe surrender, but his reply was just one word: nuts. In American slang, this word is used to insult or ridicule someone. The German officers who delivered the surrender message were confused by the response. Finally, an American colonel explained, "If you don't understand the word, go back and tell your commander to go to hell. We will not surrender." After this, fighting broke out between the American and German forces. Despite being surrounded, McAuliffe's troops, under his leadership, held their ground until reinforcements arrived, and the Germans were defeated. Thus, the general's bravery saved the American army from the humiliation of surrender. The seventh story is about a seemingly weak individual, Rosa Parks. In the 1950s and 1960s, the fight for the rights of African Americans in the U.S. was of great importance. At that time, African Americans were not allowed to enter buildings reserved for whites. Even in shared spaces like public transportation, whites were given more respect, and African Americans were humiliated. The situation was such that if a white person entered a bus, an African American had to vacate their seat for them, and no one dared to refuse. But on December 1, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, something unprecedented happened. An African American woman, Rosa Parks, was traveling on a bus. When a white man boarded, the driver asked Rosa to give up her seat. While the other African Americans got up, Rosa refused. She said, "I don't think I should have to stand." The driver called the police, and Rosa Parks was arrested. However, this incident had such an impact that Rosa became a hero within the African American community. The community boycotted the Montgomery bus service for over a year, leaving the buses running empty. During this boycott, Rosa was arrested again, but the movement for civil rights gained momentum and spread across the U.S. Rosa Parks' courage immortalized her in history. She spent her entire life as a civil rights activist. A statue of Rosa sitting on the same bus seat is preserved in the National Civil Rights Museum. Former U.S. President Barack Obama symbolically sat on the same bus where Rosa Parks had sat. Her statue still reminds African Americans of her struggle, and a plaque marks the bus stop where she boarded the bus. In Paris, even a railway station has been named after her. The eighth story is about the famous African American hero, Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King needs no introduction. He played a central role in the struggle to secure rights for African Americans. He was one of those African Americans who sacrificed his life to end white supremacy and racism in the U.S. On August 28, 1963, Martin Luther King addressed a massive crowd of Americans, predominantly African Americans, in Washington, D.C. In this speech, Martin Luther King said some words that have become immortalized in history. While he was speaking, a gospel singer and King's close friend, Mahalia Jackson, called out from the crowd, "Tell them about the dream." Martin Luther King paused his speech, looked out over the crowd, and said, "I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." He spoke more about his dream, which gave African Americans new hope and pushed them to fight the government for their rights. But this struggle cost Martin Luther King his life. He was assassinated by a white supremacist in 1968. While King was killed, African Americans eventually gained many of their rights. And eventually a time came when an African American became the President of the United States. Dear friends,